Jean said, my name is Morgan Geller of Access Law Group. We are a full-service boutique located in the heart of Wynwood, so we are definitely immersed in the arts and creative world in our beautiful city of Miami. I practice general business law with a focus on franchise law and intellectual property. So given that our world and daily life has changed because of coronavirus, everything is now being done virtually. So when we were thinking of topics, we decided to touch on issues of copyright law as it pertains to your virtual activations, live streaming, and virtual events. I have my email next to my name. So if I don't get into something that specifically pertains to you, or I don't get to your question, please feel free to email me, and I'll have my contact information on the last slide. So I'm going to touch on some general principles of copyright law, using music and other copyrighted material, and some other pointers from a legal sense and what you should do to protect yourself when presenting virtually. So let's begin. Hold on, my PowerPoint is technical difficulties, excuse me. Oh, here we go, okay. So generally, principle is it's not okay to use copyrighted music, and just because you give credit to the author of the original music or photo or article that you may copy and paste on a website does not mean that that's legal permission. It means you're not a plagiarist, but you still need copyright permission. So let's talk about how we get permission and how can you figure out if something is actually copyrighted. So copyright is a principle from federal law, and I'm not going to get into too much legalese, but it protects original works of authorship expressed in a tangible medium. And if something is a copyright, you need permission unless it falls under the fair use exception, which is going to be the most relevant, or another exception that is beyond the scope of this presentation. So let's talk about kind of this concept of tangible medium and what actually is needed to be copyrighted. So essentially, fixation means that it exists in some sort of medium where it could be read, seen, or heard. So that should be pretty self-explanatory. A sound file, if it could be seen via video or read. It's original. So a lot of times when you get the permission to use someone's work, the author, owner will have to represent that it's an original work. And that is the heart of why we have copyright protection. And then only a minimum level of creativity is required in order for something to have copyright protection. And I do want to note that for those of you who are attending to get some kind of guidance on protecting your own works of authorship, you don't have to file anything with a governing body to have copyright protection. So long as it's an original work, has some level of creativity, and appears in some sort of medium, you have rights in it as the author or owner of that work. So some examples, these are some obvious ones: music, movies, sound recordings, choreographed works, live performances, and those sorts of things. Not protected Titles, slogans, those would be considered trademarks. Ideas and other trade secrets, and again, that would fall under something else. So how can you use something legally without obtaining permission? So there's a very well-known exception. It's the most common one, called fair use. And what this means is that there are a couple of different factors that courts will look at. And obviously, if you are trying to assess whether or not your use falls under fair use, these are the things that you should look at. So the purpose and the character of the use. Are you using only a small portion of it or the whole work? Is it for commercial use, for educational use? And what kind of effect is the use going to have primarily on the marketplace and from the author? So if you are copying an entire novel and making copies available for free, obviously the effect of that use is going to be a lot larger on that author. So what I've done is I've kind of given some side-by-side comparisons. So if you're using only a small amount of material for a nonprofit, educational, personal use, is likely to fall under what's called fair use. Keep in mind, though, that just because you use a small portion of a larger work does not automatically make it a fair use. And then on the flip side, if you're using copyrighted material for advertising purposes, promotional purposes, or using a whole song, let's say you're playing a song in your business while people are attending, that's not likely going to be fair. So before we get into the specifics of music and images, I wanted to just talk briefly about kind of this concept of live streaming and the considerations that you as a person who's organizing this live streaming should take into account. So in addition to the permissions that you'll need from copyright owners in the forms of licenses, one thing you should take into account is whether or not you need a venue release from the property owner. So depending on where this event or performance is being filmed, you may need some sort of small contract with the property owner. For example, I represent a restaurant owner who's going to appear on a Food Network show. So the Food Network gave the client a location release, and as the restaurant operator, she acknowledges that my restaurant may be filmed. Food Network has the right to do whatever they want with the images and video of the venue. Another thing that should always be taken into account is each individual has a right to publicity, meaning I can market my own image the way I want. So in these scenarios, it's important that you have either, if you're going to do something online with the registration, something as easy as a statement release in the registration page, for someone saying, I acknowledge that I may appear on video, and by attending this presentation, I grant the organizer the right to use my image, likeness, etc. And then, oh wait, that was a mistake, sorry. And then lastly, the intellectual property and copyright material considerations, which we'll get into. Another thing is that this is kind of an initial, I do want to say if someone wants to interrupt or, turn off the video, I encourage this to be a conversational. I don't want to bore anyone, but with that, I'll continue. So the first question is whether or not are you streaming or showing the music or video in a public or private performance? And I actually had a friend of mine ask me recently. She was part of a Jewish organization and they wanted to play a movie during Passover on Zoom. And she asked me whether she needed a license. And so we looked at this, and the standard is it's public if it's in a place that's open to the public or a place where a substantial number of people outside a normal circle of family is gathered. So in her case, it was open to the public, but it was for a religious organization, and that was probably a gray area. But depending on the budget, the use, how much of the movie is being used, it's always recommended in the abundance of caution to contact the proper licensing agencies to get those rights, even if it is just for one-time use. Okay, so using music for a virtual event, and this can include background music, a performance of the music, or using the lyrics, or etc. So especially with startups, nonprofits, companies that may not have the budget to pay for licenses for a whole song, depending on the song and the recording artist, and how many copyrights are involved, the fee can get a little bit hefty and may not justify it. So I always recommend that if there's a way to use music for free, that's always the best. I've included some names of some royalty-free platforms, and that's always the best way to start. It's important to remember that musical works have different copyrights. So for example, the song "I Will Always Love You," which we all know from The Bodyguard, recorded by Whitney Houston, but written by Dolly Parton. So there are the rights that pertain to the composition and the lyrics and the sound recording. So depending on the song, you may need to get multiple licenses to play one song. Okay, so how do you get a music license? The first place, which is always a great source of information, is the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. This does not include recording licenses. So recording licenses generally can be obtained via Harry Fox website. If you Google, how to obtain a music license, song license, there are tons of commercial companies and platforms where you can even pay annually to get a blanket license to use and listen to their songs for purposes of your business. Again, this is different from our own individual uses, such as an annual or monthly fee that you pay to Spotify for streaming music. Oh, and then this last one, the Public Domain Information Project, that's where you can find information on music that exists in the public domain where you wouldn't need a license agreement for. So what are other things that one may need for a virtual program or some type of event presentation? The first thing would be speaker release. And again, all of these things are not always necessary. Obviously, in some type of informal event like this, Jean didn't ask me to give a speaker release, but depending on the forum and who's attending, it can be important to have that. So a speaker release is essentially, let's say someone asked me to do a speaker release. I would acknowledge that by voluntarily participating in this webinar, I understand that I may be recorded, and I'm giving the Miami Arts and Business Council the right to redistribute my speech and my materials. So and I also acknowledge that it's original work of art, so that if the Arts and Business Council puts something up that I've plagiarized, then the Arts and Business Council will not be at fault because I've violated my own representation. I'm just going to go over these general concepts. The creative works document is, let's say there's an artist who has done a painting and I'm filming something or doing a webinar in a museum. I may want to get the acknowledgement from either the museum or the artist, depending on who owns the copyright, that we can use the image of the creative work in the video. We have the right to do so, and we can publish it. Talent release is generally for actors and more public figures, where you can use their image and likeness. And this is similar to what we were talking about before with the individual's right of publicity. And then always it's important to identify any third-party permissions you may need for copyrighted material. So what can you do? How are we on time? Good, okay. So as an artist or as an owner of original works of art, whether it be a poem, a piece of visual art, a dance, whatever the case may be, there may come a time where someone will want to use your work, which would be great, right? But unfortunately, depending on the bargaining power and who's involved, artists do get taken advantage of. So it's important that when you do license or grant certain rights to use work, that you make sure that you're not giving away too much. Words to look out for are exclusive rights. So if you're giving someone the exclusive right to distribute or copy or modify your work, then they're the only one who can do that, and you've given that away, and you can no longer have that right to distribute or copy. You want to make sure that if you give away the right to modify a work, that there is some limit to that scope. And it's okay to negotiate these contracts depending on the value of the work. A lot of times the most egregious cases I've seen have been with museums and art galleries and things of that sort, where visual artists don't get royalties once their art is resold and resold and resold, but music composers and recording artists do. So if you're an artist, you should consider, what are you giving away, what are you getting in return, and how can you protect yourself? And when in doubt, hire a lawyer. So now I don't want to spend too much time with the lecture. So I've done a very general overview. Again, there are different types of licenses, blanket licenses, synchronization licenses, which is syncing music with video. But I wanted to make sure that I saved some time for questions. So for those of you who are not camera shy and want to turn on your camera and sound and ask, I'm here. If not, we can use the chat button. I see we have some chats right now. Okay, so first question is from Ernesto. Does a medium include email, text messages for initial publication purposes? I I'm assuming you mean if I had a poem and I the first time I wrote it down, or was I texted it to someone? Yes, because in this case, it's capable of being in a medium. So whether that's written down in an email or a text message or whatnot. So I would say yes, definitely, likely. And then, let's see. Karen, I purchased an annual ASCAP license. Can I use any music on my new Zoom dance? I think at the end of the day, if you do purchase a license, it's important to check back to see what that license actually says. Because the ASCAP has tons of different licenses and their fee schedules. If that's something that you wanted to speak about offline, I could definitely help you out. And then something else I wanted to touch upon with protecting your own works online and streaming is that now social media and marketing has become more important than ever to keep consumers and customers engaged. But it's important to remember that if you post something on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, that you're essentially giving them the license to use your work, how it's posted, even if it's copyrighted. So what I recommend is if you're putting your works online, whether it be music files, visual arts, even your actual content of your website, to indicate with the copyright notice, which is the little C and the circle, saying copyright, I would say copyright Morgan Geller 2020. So that gives notice to everyone that I'm asserting my copyright and I'm asserting my rights over the work. However, like I said, just because you don't do that doesn't mean that your work isn't protected, but it gives notice to others.
I have a question.
Carla
Okay.
has a question.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Carla.
So I work at a music venue called the North Beach Band Shell.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and it's run by the Rhythm Foundation, which is a nonprofit. And lately we've been doing all of our shows as live streams. And before the concert live stream actually starts, for like 5 to 10 minutes, we'll have just the playlist playing and show the title card so people know that they're in the right place and the live stream is about to start. And usually we'll have a DJ or a playlist. And some of the songs that we've played have gotten flagged and the video gets silenced, right? And sometimes the silencing goes into part of where the live stream has started. And we do have an ASCAP and BMI license. So I'm wondering, how can we avoid that from happening? Like, do we just need to pick only songs that are in ASCAP or BMI, or do we have to ask for permission before we use those songs?
I think, not to give you too much of a lawyerly answer, but again, like I said, in order to really answer that, I would need to know specifically what type of license you had. The ASCAP license, remember, it doesn't include the recording rights part of the license. So you may need additional permissions. And if you wanted to email me offline, I could, we could talk about that a little bit further. But where did it get silenced? On YouTube or?
Okay, we're doing Facebook Live.
Yeah, so Facebook Live and YouTube, I think the first step is, let's see, make sure that you have the appropriate license. And if you do and you think that you're correct, there are, although it's not easy to get someone from, a live person from Facebook or YouTube, there are procedures and ways to deal with that. But I think at the end of the day, it's important for you to make sure that you're broadcasting and showing music that doesn't infringe on the rights of others. But if you're paying annually and have these things, it should include a good amount.
Yeah, I believe we have a venue license and we pay like a certain amount per ticket that's sold and a certain amount for free events. So
Yeah, I mean,
it's
it sounds like you should be okay, especially given that it's a nonprofit, and you may, even if you don't have the quote unquote, proper use, it still may fall under the fair use
okay.
doctrine.
Okay. I have another really quick question. So, using Facebook and social and, Instagram to promote upcoming events, sometimes I'll post songs of artists that we are about to have. For example, let's say an artist has a new music video. So I'll like post the music video on Instagram, but that gets flagged, right? But if I'm using it to promote the actual show of that artist, is that fair use? Because that gets flagged all the time, especially by Sony artists.
No, because it's still for promotional use.
Okay.
So just because you're a nonprofit does not automatically grant you, the fair use exception. But at the end of the day, single-use licenses and limited licenses are pretty inexpensive. Obviously depending on the songs. I mean, I was just kind of browsing through some of the songs, and like a single use for a song was like $70, and a lot of times if you are a nonprofit or educational organization, simply reaching out and saying, we'd like to get your permission and this is our organization, a lot of times they may not even charge you. Again, this is all dependent on the organizations and the actual owners of the intellectual property rights.
Okay, so we would reach out like to the artist or to the label and ask permission. How would they show that we've been given permission so that those things don't
So on the websites that I included in the slide, a lot of them have databases with links of who to contact for specific recording labels and owners. And if you type in your email in the chat, I'll send you an email directly, and we can, because it seems like this is very relevant to what you do on a daily basis. So
awesome. Thank you.
I don't want to, delve into any, confidential. Perfect.
And then there was a similar question, if you look in the chat, from Scott Foster. It was a similar question, and maybe you answered it already. Scott, if you want to turn your microphone on, you can maybe talk a little bit if you didn't get the answer you needed.
Sure. I'm in DC, and I wanted to say I came to the presentation late, so I'm sorry about that. And do we get the slides?
I can certainly send that to Jean, and she can circulate it.
Yeah, and we'll have a recording of this that'll go out next week as well, as soon as I format it and cut out the uncopyrighted music that I put at the beginning.
Perfect. So I'm on the board of directors of this social club in DC that puts on this annual huge drag event before 2,000 people at the Washington Hilton. And this year, it can't happen. So it's been happening for 35 years, and they don't want to sort of stop. And there's a queen crowned each year.
Love it.
The question is, can we do some sort of virtual event where, people pre-record performances to live music? And yeah, that's basically the question. It's a 401c4. I don't know if we get in under sort of transformative use under fair use, or.
Well, are you lip syncing? Not you, but maybe you. Are people lip syncing the actual recording?
Lip syncing.
Yeah. So first of all, I expect you to share the details so I can watch this because it sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Next, unfortunately, this is a really good practical example because you are, even though it is a nonprofit, you're playing a song, even though it's being, performed or lip synced by someone else, it's going to be the full file. And I would say it's something that in abundance, you should get permission. I will say in real life, a lot of people don't get permission to use these songs, especially when you're talking about restaurants and bars that just play music in the background. It may be from, I may own a restaurant, I just play my own personal Spotify in the Bluetooth. And it's about balancing the risks and the resources that one has, and I'm sensitive to that. But given that it's an annual performance, there's a large group of people, you're playing a full file of a song, this is definitely something that is something that you would need permission. But again, depending on the licenses available and the specific use for a nonprofit, you may have a little bit more leeway.
Do you get?
And if you wanted to also type in your email there, I can send you my contact info, and we can talk a little bit more offline as well.
That's great, because there's a lot of these sorts of, it's been happening for 35 years. We've gotten no licenses.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying is,
but
I realize that.
But because we're doing it virtually, it's more out there, and there are a lot of these sorts. Drag queens can't perform in restaurants these days, so there's a lot of Lollapaloozas out there where people are doing it, and people are collecting money through Venmo or other ways for these performances. And so it's not as much for the live performance, it's more about the virtual. But I will.
Oh, no, I'm saying that would pertain, because it's still being performed in a medium, and the fact that it's being recorded and posted online, meaning it could be viewed over and over and over again.
Yeah. So I'll send my email,
Okay.
and I appreciate any more information, because it's a murky area. I'm a lawyer myself, but I can't figure it out.
Yeah, this is definitely a new way of life for everyone, and oftentimes the law doesn't move as quickly as our life does. But that's why I have a job, I guess.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much.
No worries. We are at 10. It's 10:36 right now. So I can take one last question, and then if there are no questions, then we can all enjoy the rest of our day and morning. And someone's pointing.
Ernest is pointing to something. Ernesto.
I had a question.
Oh, Nicole has a question.
Nicole has a question. Yeah.
Oh, it was like the Brady Bunch thing.
This is like this Hollywood Squares, Brady Bunch. I don't know.
Hollywood Squares. I forgot about that.
Well, I'm glad I tuned in, because I really was just tuning in to support you, because
thank you.
You're awesome. But as I was listening, so I have two questions in terms of, like, if we're having to get licenses for anything, is it just like, where do you even go to get that? Is it just like a quick Google search to find a license for something?
Yes, I also included some links on one of the slides where you can go to find more information, and some links where you can get licenses.
Okay.
And that'll, I can email you. I have your email. I'll email you as well.
Okay. And you may have already mentioned this, so if so, I apologize. But like, occasionally we'll do things for our volunteers. Like we, like for Volunteer Appreciation Week, we did like a dance. It wasn't, we tried to keep it at a minute, because we figured if it's at a minute, and if we say, that we don't own the rights, it'll be fine. But it still flagged it, and it didn't play. But sometimes we'll do it and it will. play. I definitely don't want to get around, you know, somebody deserves, like they put the work in, the time, they deserve to get that. But what is it that determines what will and what won't? And if that is the case, is there, and you probably already answered this, but is there something like, is there something that we could Google, like, I guess, what is it, like royalty-free music to be able to?
Yes, so that was also on the slide. I included some links to royalty-free music.
Okay.
Are they being flagged because the music is copyrighted or the actual dance? The music?
No, yeah, because the choreography was our own, but
Okay.
it was the music, yeah.
Yeah, so there are some platforms where you can find royalty-free music that's free. And as far as, you know, why some things get flagged and some don't, that's just a nature of the process of how these things get flagged. I mean, even certain accounts on Amazon are flagged if Amazon thinks that the goods being sold are not authorized or whatnot. But you know, it's hard because before, when this wasn't done virtually, no one really cared as much because not a lot of people are seeing it. But because now we have these recordings which are online, and as we know, once it's online, it's essentially there forever. The effect on the original authors and owners of the works is greater. So we're seeing a lot more flagged videos and posts on social media. But I think a lot of what you're asking is we're on previous slides.
Okay. And so it's not necessarily like the length of the time, because something 15 seconds could essentially be flagged if the right.
Yeah, so that was something that we went over is there's a common misconception that just because you use a small portion of a copy, you know, it's okay. I mean, I give the example of Vanilla Ice Baby, you know, the little beginning portion that was the downfall of his career because he didn't get permission, because it's readily, you know, recognizable.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. So thank you everybody for being here. Again, Morgan will email the presentation to me and I'll share it with all of you here. And then next week we'll have the recorded version of this will be available, so you can go back and review anything that maybe you might have missed.
Jean, if you don't mind, I'm gonna just do the share screen one more time to put up my contact information.
Oh, perfect.
If you don't mind that. Okay. So here's my email, morgan@accesslawgroup.com, and this is our number. We are not in the office, but we have virtual receptionists, so all my calls are getting forwarded to me. So I am reachable.
And I want to mention, Access Law has an amazing Access Art program. They host, well, when we were physically in place, they had exhibitions that changed out regularly. And I think now they're doing a lot of virtual programming. So if you go to their website under Access Art, you'll see a schedule and things that they do.
And Jean has been an amazing contributor. So thank you.
Yeah, we do an online art class every other Wednesday, which has been a lot of fun. So thank you everybody for being here today. We will do this again next Thursday. Please sign up and join us. I think I can, well, you'll get an invitation for the next one. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for joining us today.
Bye everyone. Thank you.
And thank you, Morgan.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone for attending, and I hope you learned something.
Very helpful.
Bye.
Bye.